Hello and welcome everybody to another video. In this video I want to talk about Last Epoch. So Last Epoch is an action RPG game developed by 11th Hour Games. It is currently in early access and is playable by everyone if they purchase it. Some of this review may be out of date in places depending on when this video is seen, as the developers are constantly updating the game, so bear that in mind as I break down the game and give opinions based on my current experiences. With that being said, there is no multiplayer implemented as of yet, but that is something that's coming eventually, and it currently allows a global chat with other players while you're playing the game. One aspect of this game that stands out from a lot of other action RPGs is that the game involves time travel between different eras, allowing interesting story elements as you progress. There are plans for future seasons, which may be comparable to the League mechanics in Path of Exile's releases every few months, where the game has new areas, enemies, or gear that is acquired through special events. I assume we will see holiday themes with possible holiday cosmetics in the future, but those are just my guesses on it, and we'll have to see how it actually pans out. Also, there is currently a ladder implemented to motivate players to push their characters as far as possible in the endgame arena. So starting off, when you create a character, we currently have 5 options for a class choice. Each class is able to choose a mastery to their class, basically specifying their class specialty focus. The classes are gender locked, having options between Acolyte, who can become a Warlock, Lich, or Necromancer. There's a Primalist, who can become a Shaman, Beastmaster, or Druid. A Sentinel, who can become a Forge Guard, Paladin, or Void Knight. A Mage, who can become a Spellblade, Sorcerer, or Rune Master. And recently, they added a Rogue as the 5th class that can become a Blade Dancer, a Marksman, and later on they're releasing the Falconer as the 3rd mastery. After you create your character, you begin making your way through the story, leveling up and finding gear along the way. The max level for a character is 100. As you level up and do quests, you will get skill points in 2 areas. One area is your passive class skills, which you add points into from the bottom up in your base class tab at the top of the list. Adding points will push up your skill axis, allowing you to add into skill nodes higher in the tree, and to the right, as you climb up the tree, you will hit tiers that unlock special abilities to use. Later, you will unlock the ability to add points into other masteries for your class after having 20 initial points in your main tree tab, allowing you even more specialized playstyles. The second area is actually a separate ability tree where you can place the abilities you want to use on your action bar. As you level up, you will gain more abilities you are able to equip. The abilities that you choose will gradually level up as you play the game, allowing you to add points in a skill tree specific to each ability. The max level for each ability is rank 20. With all passive skills, there is a vendor where you can undo skill points and place them in new areas. For the skill points used on the abilities themselves, you can undo them, but must re-level up those abilities again to place those points in different areas. With gear, there are 6 rarities. You have common with no item modifiers, magic which has 1 or 2 modifiers, rares that have 3 or 4 modifiers, and exalted, which signifies that a piece of gear has a level 6 or 7 tier modifier, which is only obtainable through drops and not through crafting. The other 2 rarities are set items that provide bonuses for each additional piece of the set items that you have equipped, and uniques, which offer special bonuses not found on any other pieces of gear. With the crafting system, you have massive control over the modifiers that are on each piece of gear, except the ones on set or unique items. Common, magic, rare, and exalted are fair game though. You will find affixed shards as you play the game as random drops that you can acquire, and you can even acquire some by using a shattering rune to break down items that you don't need to try to obtain very specific shards that were modifiers on that gear. You use these affixed shards to add modifiers to empty spots on an item, or to increase the stat tier of one of the ones that are already on that item. All items can have a max of 4 affixes on them, with 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes allowed, similar to how Path of Exile and Diablo Games deliver their modifiers on gear within a list. Prefixes and suffixes have differing options for modifier choices, which forces you to balance out stats on differing gear pieces, such as stacking void resist on a helmet, and then stacking necrotic protection on another piece of gear to create a balance in survivability. You can even use a rune of removal to remove a random affix to free up space for a different one, or you can use a rune of cleansing to remove all of them to start an item over from scratch. The maximum tier a modifier can be increased to from crafting is 5. Higher tiers, such as 6 and 7, can only be found on dropped loot, which makes them an exalted. Every time you add modifiers or increase their tiers, you add instability to the item. The more instability that you add, the lower your chances of success will be when you're trying to add or increase further tiers. Using certain glyphs can help increase your odds, but eventually you may push the item too far, resulting in a fracture or even damaging the item. Fracturing causes the item to lock up and not be upgradable anymore. This is the most common way of failing an upgrade on an item. It doesn't do anything negative besides stopping you from crafting the item any further than it already is. Seen less often is damaging the item. which can cause a loss in some or potentially all the modifiers currently on the item. With each upgrade to the item, you will see the odds of success and failure, so weigh the options carefully, but don't be afraid to push your luck on items in the beginning to teach yourself the ways of how crafting works. Eventually, after you complete the main story, you will end up at the endgame. Surprise, surprise. And that is where I think the game really shines. Currently, there are 2 endgame activities you can partake in. There are 2 other endgame activities that are listed on the roadmap for future updates, but I actually don't have any idea what those will consist of. So the first and main activity I would say is the Monolith of Fates. With these, you start off with a level 55 area that has a monolith you click on to activate. When activated, you select between 2 modifiers to add to the map, which they call echoes, as in echoes of the past. You can use gold to reroll 2 modifier choices 1 time per echo in case your choices are bad and you want to risk the chance of finding better options at a slightly higher difficulty scaling. After you select one, you will be teleported into an echo that will have an objective. Sometimes these objectives are making your way to defeat a boss-style monster, other times it can be destroying shrines or clearing waves of enemies that spawn from a forge. Once completed, you can open a portal back to the Monolith area where you can buy and sell at a vendor and even open a reward chest. After completing the echoes, you will occasionally find arena keys from the reward chest. If I recall correctly, I believe it's every 5 echoes that you complete, there will usually be an arena key. These are used for the other endgame activity known as the arena, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. After completing numerous echoes, you will increase the chances of running into a questline choice instead of a normal modifier for an echo. Doing this is important for completing the Monolith area in general. On the 3rd questline of each monolith, you will fight a boss that is usually pretty difficult and requires dodging specific attacks and some other mechanics such as destroying objects before being able to actually damage the boss. Once the boss is defeated, you will complete this overall monolith and be able to choose between 3 blessings and also be able to progress to a higher level monolith zone. The blessings are random from a pool of options for each monolith. Sometimes you may have to even rerun a monolith if you're looking for a very specific blessing. The blessings themselves are modifiers that can increase many things such as an overall experience gain, specific gear drop increases, and many more. These buffs will also work in every activity of the game, so they are very worthwhile to get. If you are lacking in some resistances, these can help level those out, or if you're gold farming or even farming for a very specific piece of gear, such as a class-specific item, there are buffs that increase the drops of those specific things. Eventually, you'll complete all monoliths and even upgrade past monoliths to level 100 zones, which can also give better blessings that'll pop up in the pool of options when you complete them again. So that covers the basics of the Monolith of Fates endgame, and we can now go over to the Arena endgame. So the Arena is basic in concept, but a big focus for players who want to see just how far they can push their characters against more and more difficult enemies. With the use of an arena key that you find in the monoliths, you can run an arena event. You will need a key for each one you decide to run, but it's pretty easy to build up a collection as you're running through the monoliths. The arena consists of a small area where you will face waves of monsters. Each wave of enemies gets more and more difficult, and after clearing 5 waves, you'll be able to choose whether you want to call it quits or if you want to continue on to harder waves. The arena event will end either by quitting or by dying. There is a ladder ranking system that goes along with this that shows the highest waves certain players have completed and with what class they use to do that. It's very similar to the ladder system Diablo 3 uses for the Greater Rift completions. A lot of players use this to determine if they have a good build by comparing the highest completions compared to someone else's build. So that's the general overview of Last Epoch in its current state. I'm sure I missed some details here and there, and possibly the game has changed a lot since this video's release, but I think it's helpful to identify what Last Epoch is all about. With that out of the way, I'll explain my overall opinion of the game coming from the perspective of someone who grew up playing the Diablo franchise in its entirety, the Torchlight series, Grim Dawn, and of course, Path of Exile. So to me, Last Epoch looks and feels like it will truly be the next big action RPG, containing fantastic character builds and endgame content. I consider Path of Exile to be the current reigning king, though I do know that many people don't enjoy the complexity and the grind of Path of Exile, or even many other things, but that's also why I think Last Epoch will be a king in its own right. It has incredible depth, great graphics, and a lot of replayability, without being as overwhelming as Path of Exile can be. So many people are hooked on this game even with a single player only current model, and I expect that it's going to expand rapidly when multiplayer comes out. Seeing how builds blend together and work together is going to be exciting, and I definitely can't wait for that experience. The game feels great, doesn't seem overly buggy or clunky in any way, at least to me, especially when I compare it to my experience with Wolfson, Lords of Mayhem. I think the endgame is great so far, allowing lots of progression, a nice scaling of difficulty, and it will probably be even more impressive when the other endgame elements are added later on. Honestly, even without the other endgame elements, they have done a fantastic job with what they have right now, and the endgame is more in-depth than the Diablo games, the Torchlight games, and even Wolcen's endgame. I wouldn't say it's nearly as vast as Path of Exile's endgame, but it's also significantly easier to understand, while still having a great longevity to it. I like the amount of gear options there are, and the crafting allows almost any piece of gear to become perfect for your build, but I also hope that they add a little bit more styles to the game. Sometimes it can feel like you're pretty limited with the way that your character looks, especially when it comes to armor, but they already have plans for cosmetics. There's even a window that already exists to show the equipment slots for future skins and whatnot, so we should eventually see some flair like Path of Exile's cosmetics, and that alone will probably help make your character feel a lot more unique and less limited in the looks department. Overall, I'm just hooked on this game, and it's still not even out of early access. The developers seem very passionate about this project, and they continue to deliver more and more content. The future of Last Epoch looks fantastic, and I hope to see more people giving it a chance. And feel free to hit the like and subscribe if you'd like to see future content from me. As always, everyone, thanks for watching.